Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Thought I'd do some Q&A since I'm a little bit light on videos right now. I want to do one on the Thoughtless or Selfless potion, but I can't use it for footage in the background because I still don't have one. Like, they're actually really difficult to get. My original plan was to have both, you know, have the Devil Horns and the Halo, but I might have to just choose one and I don't know which. I made a comment on a video a while ago where I said, I was talking about my warrior and about how I always tried to pick the thing that makes me stand out rather than look good. And like, this is a perfect example of that. The Halo looks better. Like, the horns should be attached to your head, but they're not. They're just sort of floating there. The Halo looks better. However, the horns are going to be a lot rarer because they don't look as good. So maybe I should go for the horns. I think I might end up with like having devil horns on this. We shall see anyway. Welcome to another video, guys. I grabbed a bunch of questions from the previous Q&A, which, as you all know, was a bit of a mishmash of a video. So this will just be raw Q&A this time. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Try and get some unique ones in. I feel like some of this is sort of circling territory we've done before. But hey, let's just jump straight in with the first question from YTXM, who says, my question for you, WP. When are you getting off your ass on EU and joining the Desolation community? Never, because I don't play on Europe. I play North America, and there's no way I'm gonna swap like my whole region to go over there when I've like got such a big network of people I now sort of interact with over on NA, like across the 3 game types. It'd be crazy. Sorry, but to EU players, there's very little chance I'll be over there, and especially not on the biggest server since it's probably full, right? I know that Blackgate at least on NA is full. The next question is from Sebastian Devereux, who says, I think that's how you say your name, is anyone else kind of hoping that in the conclusion of this chapter of the living story, Scarlet succeeds? That is a very interesting idea, because it is so left field. I don't think many people are expecting that, and so to have her succeed, have her beat us down and be victorious, would be quite the end of the season. The only problem with it, obviously, is people hate Scarlet. So if she did succeed and it's like, yeah, we're going into season 2 of The Living World, and it's still about Scarlet, come on, nobody is going to be happy with that. If it literally just does end up like how the Tower of Nightmares ended, for example, or the Queen's Jubilee ended, where we clearly trashed all of her stuff and did everything, and then she just goes, ah ha ha, I have a plan, and runs away, nobody is going to be happy with that at all. But I do like the idea of her succeeding, maybe succeeding marginally, or maybe like succeeding fully, but in doing so, this like removes her from the story. So for example, she could, her ultimate goal, she's digging into the ley lines for the magic that's flowing beneath Tyria for whatever reason. What if this is somehow to access the realms of the gods like we once did or whatever, and then she just like leaves? So she succeeded, but then she's also disappeared, maybe triggered off another chain of events that's going on, which is about season 2, but the villain herself is still out there, and there's this lingering threat that she'll return. And it's not like a good lingering threat. It's not because we actually care about her and that we're scared of what she might do. It's a threat because the player base doesn't want to see the villain turn up too quickly. And then finally season 4 of The Living World comes back and Scarlet has returned, except now maybe she's a good guy and they do some other stuff. Okay, I'm running away with the ball here. I think it would be interesting to have her succeed. Scarlet has grown on me, and I think more people than would like to admit it, Scarlet has grown on them too, and there's nothing wrong with changing your opinion. Scarlet was very poorly implemented, honestly, in earlier patches, but they've been a lot smarter with her lately. There's a lot of discussion that I'm seeing popping up where people are trying to shoehorn this idea that she might really be the good guy. People are legitimately in the community beginning to question, maybe she's just not insane, maybe she is somehow the good guy. Like the new back piece that came in the most recent patch, where it says, Kaith, one day you'll see, I was right, so you will see this, right? Like, someone made the very good point, I feel, that this either solidifies her insanity because it's just so wrong, or it really does show that there's a glimmer of reason and intelligence behind what Scarlet is doing, and she's doing it for her own sake. Which is such a far-flung idea, honestly. I'm still very much in the camp, she's crazy, she's evil, let's just get rid of her. But the opinions are changing. Just the fact that people are putting forward these ideas and willing to get behind an idea like that shows that the character is becoming a lot more of a character now, rather than just this stupid device that talks, that is being used to create disasters for us to save as players. But yeah, great idea. We'll see what they do in the final patch. I think just a marginal success would be pretty good, as long as it was quite disastrous. And we'll be talking about that, I suppose, next week. Repulsive says, if you were to start over in Guild Wars 2, this was actually a question we had on Visual Wood, but I want to answer it here. Would you still choose Elementalist as your main with the class knowledge I now have? That's a really difficult question, because Elementalist really struggled for a long time in a lot of regards. Before the community really understood, especially like what Fiery Greatsword did, for example, before the community began to realise, oh wait, the most optimum way to play the game isn't to go through all your rotations, but to just stick on certain things, you know, auto attack or keep spamming a certain skill. These are the highest DPS options. Before the community latched onto those, I feel like the Elementalist was in a really, really bad place. Trait-wise as well, there really wasn't too much interesting going on with Elementalist. I do feel like that class, though, out of all classes in Guild Wars 2, has the most well-organised trait page. Like, whenever I play another class and I want to add traits in places, I'm like, oh, this is just icky. Why am I getting condition damage and healing power together? That's not actually a real example. But there's loads of stuff that just feels horrible and off, like rangers. Oh, yeah, I want to be a trap ranger. Okay, so I'm going to go in this line that basically doesn't benefit my condition-based traps whatsoever. Like, the pairings of just the attributes across all the other classes, I always find something that's really annoying. For Elementalists, it's like pretty basic and it makes sense. Oh, Earth Magic is giving you defense. Air Magic is giving you higher spikes. Fire Magic is giving you higher flat damage. Water is increasing your health and your healing power. It just works. There were some oddities. I still believe that the water line is too strong because you can take such offensive traits in it, despite the fact it's like a defensive tree. But then Elementalist kind of needs that as well because it is such low base vitality and armor value at the same time. Ellie was fun to level, so I can't really complain about it there, but I do think that if I just got to restart everything in this game, I wouldn't pick the same class twice because I already know everything that's going on with that class. To be honest with you, I'd probably pick either Ranger or Guardian. I have a level 80 with like full gear for, you know, Zerk stuff, at least on all the other classes in the game. Those two I don't have, and I still have very little knowledge. I think Ranger, though the base gameplay is really boring and dull to me, the idea of, at least in PvE at launch, running around collecting pets is pretty cool. And there, you can go into pretty deep theory craft, I feel, with the Ranger, especially considering they have like this whole extra grid of things that they can deal with when it comes to the pets. So maybe Ranger. I feel like most Guardians are like a very specific kind of person. Like they're like, oh yeah, I played a Paladin in WoW, or I played this in another game. Guardian is like my thing. It's like a lot of Guardians, I don't know, they kind of latch onto that kind of play style, and I'm not really that kind of player. I've never really considered myself to be someone that cares about being the Holy Knight dude, even though I'm sure when I was younger I used to play certain games and always be the healer and stuff. So yeah, maybe Ranger would be the choice, which is weird because it's like my most detested profession in the game, honestly, and I think that's unfair. I do judge them unfairly, and it's because I haven't played them, so I shouldn't really say stuff like that. The C1 Ass says, or the class, I guess is what his name's supposed to be, says, hey WP, I think we all agree that the Zhaitan fight sucked mechanics-wise, simply hitting skill 2. What do you think about it lore-wise? They have woken up numerous times in the past and no one has been able to defeat any of them due to their incredible power. Yet, during this cycle, we've had Destiny's Edge nearly beating 1 by taking over its mind, and us beating Zhaitan simply by using firearms. What do you think of the last few personal story quests, where instead about us finding a secret weapon that would weaken the Elder Dragon, or something like the Infusion versus Massar or Blim's invention in the LA fight in Guild Wars Beyond that would give us an upper hand versus our predecessors who fought the dragons? I had a discussion on this last year. So last year over Christmas, I sort of went on a bit of a hiatus with the game for maybe 2 months. I didn't put up any YouTube videos. I don't know if you guys remember. But towards the end of those 2 months, someone posted on Reddit, hey, where the hell's WP been? And it got all these tons and tons and tons of comments. So I stepped in and started talking about what I thought about the game and the fact that I, of course, was coming back to YouTube. But one main thing I was talking about on there with one of my disappointments with the game was the personal story. If you guys look back on my channel, when Guild Wars 2 first launched, one of my earliest real critiques of the game post-launch was my own thoughts on the personal story and where it went wrong. And by and large, I feel I still stand by pretty much everything I said there. Anyway, one of the major sticking points for the personal story has always been this idea of how the story resolved itself and how shoddily it was done. Just the fact that you're asking me this question is testament to how badly this story was told. You're asking me how comes we just killed it with regular firearms? Well, they weren't regular firearms. See, if you played the game a million times over and did every single branch and paid attention to the smallest little snippets of NPC dialogue and placed them together, and yes, this might sound fun on some superficial level, but in reality, implementation-wise, this was not a fun aspect of the personal story. You would have found out that the firearms we used to kill Zhaitan, the gun, the cannon that was loaded on the Glory of Tyria, I think is the name of the airship, that was actually like a specific type of magic that was slowly being researched throughout the personal story, developed by an Asura, and the idea was it's Zhaitan's own magic that has been taken from... Don't forget, Elder Dragons consume magic. That's all he's doing. So basically, they've taken magic, poisoned it, and then they fire the firearm at Zhaitan, who then promptly goes to consume it. Usually this kind of thing wouldn't work at all, but he consumes it, it poisons him, and he dies. You can see a little bit of relation here as well to Scarlet with all this stuff she's doing with poison and also trying to get into the magical ley lines and stuff, and perhaps that's relevant for Living World right now. But that was the story of Zhaitan. Like, there was a real reason why we killed him. It's just that it was really shoddily told. Nobody understood it, and by and large, the key part of the story that brought about his downfall was the construction of this airship and this cannon and that whole thread, right? This is why we are better than all the other races and all the other cycles. This is like the significant thing that all the focus should have been on, and yet there wasn't any focus on it. There were a couple of throwaway lines. For the rest of the time, we were doing stupid little things on the ground, and I agree that like ground assaults and naval assaults and all those ending personal story bits could have been very cool action-wise, but for the actual story of the game, suddenly throwing a random airship in that we've heard some hints about, but then is all of a sudden built fully and we didn't get to see any of the construction of it or take part in any of it, that randomly picks us up at the end of a Ra and helps us do the deed, was not on. That was a greater crime to me than the whole press skill 2 to kill Zhaitan. I think the end of the personal story was so cinematic. They obviously had great ideas and it was obviously cut short, but it was very, very cinematic. I had a pretty horrible time doing that dungeon because I was playing with a bunch of my guildies who throughout the entire thing were complaining and bitching and just generally being really, really negative, and I was trying to find the redeeming things about the dungeon, and for the entire dungeon I thought it was okay, especially in comparison to the state of all the other dungeons at launch. It was okay, and then the final nail on the head wasn't just the pressing skill 2 on the cannons, which I think they all immediately recognised, but it was the fact that the story had no satisfying resolution. It seemed like no matter what we did, it would have happened anyway. We had no part to play in the actual destruction of Zhaitan when you really come down to it. We just got to sort of witness it a little bit and help the pact out and sort of second-hand, move the dominoes in a place that would have this airship be built. And it was a huge, huge, huge shame. If you look back at that video I released just after launch talking about all this stuff, and honestly from a more educated standpoint, because I'd played the personal story a lot more around about that time, you'll see that one of the main things I was saying, the cause of this huge issue is because they tried to split it a million ways from Sunday, and that was a massive, massive mistake. The personal story, there's a lot of things in Guild Wars 2, okay, where ArenaNet were trying to innovate, and they were biting off more than they could chew. I think that they really did some things very, very well that are core to the experience of the game. Accessibility, the dynamic event system, and their combat in general are real redeeming factors of the game that they tried very hard to innovate on. There are other things that they tried to do very well, and they had all these elaborate plans, and the worst of those ideas that they failed to implement by a country mile was the personal story, and it all comes down to all these branches. It was just disgraceful. So yeah, to your question, it's an irrelevant question. You know, this is what we did differently. There wouldn't have been any point of adding new personal story quests at the end where we find some secret way to kill Zhaitan. In theory, that's worse than the idea of the airship. If the last few missions of the personal story were all about the airship, the Glory of Tyrion, setting it up, and all that plan was laid out and it was all clear, and you know, they actually established there's some risk here. It's like, oh, this is just a theory that we've slowly been proving throughout the personal story, but now it's go time. You know, if they'd laid that all out clearly and the last few quests of the personal story were all based around that, then we could have had a much better story on our hands. It would have been really bad if just out of nowhere they were like, okay, you're in the last 5 missions here, let's just go find this ancient thing that helps us kill the dragon. Because again, it's like, well, what's the point in all the rest of the personal story? You know, it doesn't lead to anything. It should be a continuous progression that builds to that crescendo, and it just wasn't. Anyway, I've been on this question for way too long. I hope you found your answer in there. The next question is from Tekal Nelmac, who says, hey WP, what would you do when ArenaNet shows you once again a new update before the release is announced and you see it's really horrible and not just, okay, some will not like it, I mean really bad? You're asking me that if I had another talk with ArenaNet and they gave me, oh, here is what Season 5 of The Living Story is eventually going to be, and it was like the most god-awful, what the hell is this? They're introducing pixies to the game, and the new pixie race runs around spreading stardust in all the previous areas of the map, and they're not actually adding any new content. It's just you get to paint everything in rainbow colors, and you unlock an achievement once you've done it. You know, if they do something terrible like that, what would I do? Well, hopefully nothing. I've mentioned this a couple of times, I think. I actually don't think I'm going to be asking to know anything in advance anymore, because it's sort of crippled the speculation I can do on the channel, which does suck. You know, like, this is professional me versus personal me right now. Like, as a fan of the game, I really want to know what that stuff is. But in actuality, knowing it early, a lot of the Season 1 stuff hasn't actually benefited my channel professionally. I haven't been able to play off of it too much. And really it's hindered it, because it's meant that a lot of things I could be openly speculating with you guys, I now can't, or it feels fake somehow. And because you guys don't know everything that I know, you don't know what's real speculation and what's not. It's just kind of been annoying. So basically I have to suck it up and stop being a fan and say to them, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. I can't know anything in advance. So that's not going to be a situation that comes under my nose, hopefully, in the future. If I did hear something like that, I would probably try and tell them, but also, you got to consider, like, I'm not a QA guy, I'm not necessarily someone they would be looking for feedback from, and I'm not really sure what the dynamic there even would be, so mostly, I have to be honest, even though I'd like to say otherwise, I'd probably be quite tight-lipped about it, and just, you know, rant about it in private on my channel, and then, but to their faces just say, oh, okay, this is fine, because, you know, I'm probably not qualified to be giving that advice, or it's not the correct avenue for it, you know? Outcast Shadow 7 says, have you heard anything yet that would suggest we the players will be able to shape the game again? I think having the election between Ellen and Evan was a fun idea, and it got many people involved and invested in Guild Wars 2 more again, and I think this is a good system of having people involved in the game. I think that would have been awesome. There's been like no word from data mining or anything like that about another choice coming, but I think one of the best things they could have done to wrap up Season 1 of The Living World is end it on a decision. Like, this is one of the biggest things that The Living World can do. It can actually let you shape the story of the future. The Ellen Evan thing, like, is still relevant. You know, it was a long time ago we made that vote, and it is still relevant. Whenever you see Evan now, whenever you see Keel, you know that they're in that position because of what we the players did, and that's actually quite a nice feeling, especially as time continues to go by and you see these are still major players in the story. Like, that's awesome. What I think the best thing they could do for the end of Season 1 is give everyone some kind of a decision, because that lets you think, wow, okay, not only did we just have this awesome story, not only did it just end in an awesome way, not only did it just set up Season 2 in a really good way, but also I have had an impact on this, and I am shaping how Season 2 is going in some regard, and a lot of those players, after Season 1 is over, are going to be much more inclined to stay about for the wait to see how Season 2 begins, and a lot of the Season 2 new players that come in because of marketing or whatever, where they say, oh, there's a whole new story in Guild Wars 2, all those people that come in, they're going to hear about the decisions people previously made. Like, what better time is there to give people a choice than at the end of a season? There's not. But it remains to be seen what ArenaNet's plans are there. They could go for some kind of arbitrary pattern system where it's like, okay, once every season you get to make a decision. Or maybe they could start pushing it so much more updates have decisions to be made. But then we kind of get into the personal story territory as well. I'd rather far fewer decisions to be made that all have a great impact than a million, you know, like a decision to every update that really doesn't mean that much and you don't care about. You know, the less decisions we have to make, the better in my opinion, but we are overdue. Last question is from Slevin K, who had a kind of an interesting idea that I wanted to air out there. Hey there, WP. I hope you don't mind, but I have a question for you. Since every race has their own starter zone right in front of their capital city, where do you think the starter zone for Tengu would be when or if they're added? Seeing as Lion's Arch gets destroyed and hearing your theories in Visual Wood about getting rid of LA entirely made me wonder if they could or will turn it into their starter zone, since it's lying right next to the Dominion of Winds. That's a really crazy idea. I didn't think about that at all. I think it would be kind of lame, seeing how the update's gone, and I talked a little bit about, you know, how I'm slightly disappointed with the destruction. It still is very much Lion's Arch. So if that, like, if they added a new race and then the old Lion's Arch or whatever, the old Lion's Arch, is that now underwater? If Lion's Arch's ruins now becomes like their starter zone, I wouldn't be as excited about that as I would be if it was an entirely new starter zone situated entirely behind the walls of the Dominion of Winds and with lots of, you know, tall trees and air-themed stuff. You know, imagine like the Bazaar of the Four Winds, but for an entire zone. That's how I imagine the Tengu starter area could be and the Tengu city could be. And I don't know whether Lion's Arch can really deliver on that vision, so I feel like let's not do that. It would be more exciting if it was a totally new area. But I do like your thinking. I do like your thinking of repurposing something like that. And it's an interesting thought whether they add new zones or destroy current zones and remake them again. I think so many of us are craving for new zones. Some people might be kind of disappointed by that as well. But yeah, so there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you've got any questions, particularly about stuff I might not have talked about for a while, maybe opinions have changed, maybe there's a completely new stuff going on, do let me know. I will read them all, and I guess I will see you next time for patch preview for the next patch, perhaps. I do still have that new game to replace draft building, which I'm keen to get started on again very soon. So anyway, thank you very much, guys. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.